My best friend of 15 years secretly applied for the same job I told her about in confidence and got it. What she didn't know was that the hiring manager called me first. There is a specific kind of grief that comes from losing a friend, not to death or distance, but to the slow, devastating revelation that the person you thought you knew was, in some essential way, a character you had written yourself, that the real person had different values, different loyalties, different definitions of what love and friendship actually require. It is the grief of an editor who discovers deep in the manuscript that the protagonist was never who the opening chapters promised. I have been trying to write about this for 8 months. I am going to try to be honest, which means I am going to have to be honest about myself too, and not just about Kira. Kira and I met in our freshman year of college at the University of Michigan. We were assigned adjacent rooms in the same dormitory hall, which is the kind of arbitrary proximity that occasionally produces the deepest friendships of your life, and occasionally produces nothing at all. With us, it produced 15 years. 15 years of shared apartments and cross-country moves and career crises and relationship disasters, and the kind of detailed, continuous, intimate knowledge of another person that you can only build through sustained, deliberate presence. We were each other's emergency contacts. We had keys to each other's apartments. We had held each other through things I will not list here because they belong to both of us, and she has not consented to their telling. I need you to understand the weight of 15 years before I tell you the rest. My name is Simone. I am 33 years old, and I worked at the time of the story, as a content strategist at a digital health company in Austin, Texas. Last February, through a professional connection at a networking event, I learned about an opening at a well-regarded media company headquartered in New York, a senior content director role that was, in the most straightforward possible sense, the exact job I had been working toward for the better part of a decade. The connection who mentioned it to me was a woman named Patricia, who sat on the hiring committee and who had heard me speak at a panel discussion earlier that year, and had, she said, been impressed enough to think of me specifically when the position opened. It was not yet posted publicly. Patricia told me about it before it went to open listing, which in hiring terms is a meaningful advantage: first mover knowledge, time to prepare a tailored application, and a direct internal connection on the committee. It was, in the language of opportunity, a genuinely significant gift. That evening, I called Kira. I called her because that is what I had always done. When something good happened, when something frightening happened, when something that needed to be spoken aloud to become real, I called Kira. I told her everything: the role, the company, Patricia's name, the timeline, the fact that it wasn't public yet. I told her I was terrified and excited, and that it felt like the kind of moment your whole career builds toward. Kira said all the right things. She was warm and enthusiastic, and she told me I was the exact right person for that job, and that I needed to go after it with everything I had. She asked clarifying questions about the company, the scope of the role, the reporting structure, and I answered them fully, because that is what you do with your best friend of 15 years. You answer fully. You don't parse what you share. We talked for almost 2 hours. By the end of the call, I felt as I always felt after talking with Kira, steadied and seen and less alone in the specific vulnerability of wanting something. I spent the following 3 weeks preparing my application: the portfolio, the cover letter — I went through 11 drafts — the tailored case study Patricia had mentioned the hiring committee would appreciate. I worked on it with the focused, slightly desperate energy of someone who knows an opportunity is real and finite and cannot be squandered. I submitted my application on a Tuesday. On Thursday of the same week, Patricia called me. I assumed she was calling about my application. She was not. She called to ask me, in a carefully worded way that I could tell had been deliberated over, whether I was aware that someone in my professional network had also submitted an application for the role, someone who had listed me as a reference without contacting me first, and who had, in their cover letter, referenced several specific details about the position's internal structure that were not in the public job listing and were not general knowledge. I asked her the name. She told me. I sat very still for what I think was a long time. Patricia, to her credit, did not rush me.
Then I asked Patricia if I needed her to provide a formal reference, and she said that in the circumstances, she thought a candid conversation would be more useful than a formal letter. She asked me directly to tell her honestly what I thought of Kira's professional capabilities and character. I want to be precise about this moment because it is the one I have returned to most often in the 8 months since. I had several choices in that conversation. I could have said nothing meaningful, given a neutral non-reference of the kind that communicates caution without making specific claims. I could have been actively negative, which the circumstances would have given me some emotional justification for, even if it would have been a misuse of that particular power. I could have been falsely positive, which would have been dishonest to Patricia and damaging to the company she was trying to serve. What I did was tell the truth. Kira is, professionally, genuinely capable. She is smart and articulate and produces good work. I said so. I also said, and I measured every word, that I had learned recently that she had applied for a role I had told her about in confidence, before it was publicly listed, using information I had shared privately, and without telling me she intended to do so, let alone asking my permission to list me as a reference. I said that I considered this a serious breach of trust, and that for me, trust and integrity were not separable from professional character. I told Patricia that Kira's ability to do the job was real. Her judgment about how she pursued it was something she would have to weigh herself. Patricia thanked me and ended the call.
I sat in my car in the parking garage outside my office for 35 minutes. I am not entirely sure what I was processing, the betrayal itself, or the conversation I just had, or the strange doubled grief of losing something I hadn't even had yet. Because what I felt sitting there was not rage. It was something worse and quieter than rage. It was the feeling of looking at 15 years and finding, somewhere in the middle of them, a seam you'd missed, a place where the material wasn't what you thought. I did not call Kira. Not that day, not that week. She called me on a Thursday, 12 days after my conversation with Patricia, and she was bright and warm and asked how my application was going and whether I'd heard anything back. And I understood, sitting with the phone in my hand, that she did not know about my conversation with Patricia. She did not know that Patricia had called me. She was performing normalcy, and she was doing it with the easy fluency of someone who believed the ground was still solid. I told her I had withdrawn my application. She made a sympathetic sound and said something about how there would be other opportunities and that she was sorry it hadn't worked out. I let her say it. I didn't interrupt, didn't correct her, didn't explain. I just let her say it. And then I said that I needed to tell her something. I told her, plainly, that I knew she had applied, that she had used information I'd shared in confidence, that she had listed me as a reference without asking, and that the hiring manager had called me. The silence that followed was very long and very complete. When Kira spoke, she did not deny any of it. She said she had thought about telling me and decided it would make things awkward. She said she hadn't thought I'd mind. She said she genuinely believed it was a role that suited her better than it suited me, which was, I thought, the most revealing thing she said, because it told me exactly how the calculus had worked in her head. She had decided, privately and unilaterally, that her judgment about what was best superseded my right to know. She asked if I had said anything negative to Patricia. I told her I had told the truth. She asked what that meant. I told her it meant I had described what happened accurately and let Patricia draw her own conclusions. Kira did not get the job. I do not know whether what I said to Patricia was decisive, or whether there were other candidates stronger than either of us, or some combination. What I know is that 2 weeks after my conversation with Kira, Patricia called me again, a different kind of call, shorter, warmer, to tell me that after further review, they were extending the role's timeline and expanding the candidate pool, and that they hoped I would keep my application open. I got the job. I am in New York now. I have been here for 6 months, and the work is hard and consuming and exactly what I wanted it to be. Kira and I have not spoken since that phone call. I have not blocked her or made any dramatic declaration of ending things. I simply stopped reaching back. She has texted a handful of times, once to apologize, once to suggest we talk, once to send a photograph from a trip we took together years ago, which I think was meant to remind me of something, and which did, in fact, remind me of something. Though not what she intended, it reminded me that the friendship those photographs documented was real. It just was not the whole truth. Here is the thing I have had the most trouble sitting with in the 8 months since. I don't think Kira is a bad person. I have tried on that interpretation and it doesn't fit correctly. What I think is that she is a person who, in a moment of wanting something, made a series of small ethical compressions, each one small enough to seem survivable, until she had arrived somewhere she couldn't have predicted from the starting point. She told herself stories that made it okay, that she deserved it, that I wouldn't mind, that the friendship could hold the weight of it. People tell themselves these stories all the time. Most of the time, they never get tested, and the story becomes the truth by default. Our story got tested, and the truth came out at the cost of 15 years. I have a new apartment in Brooklyn. It has good light in the mornings and a kitchen I am slowly learning to cook in properly, which has always been something I meant to do and never made time for. I walk to work when the weather allows, across a bridge, with the city opening up in front of me in that particular way that New York has of making you feel, on the right morning, like you are exactly where you are supposed to be. I have made new friends here, not replacements, because that is not how people work, but additions. People who are building me from the beginning with the correct information, which is, I have come to believe, the only real way to build anything that holds. I miss Kira sometimes. Not constantly, not desperately, but in the specific way you miss a version of your life that turned out to be slightly different from what you thought it was. I miss who I believed she was. I am still, slowly, making my peace with who she turned out to be. What I know is this: the job is real. The city is real. The work I did to get here, 11 drafts of a cover letter, years of building a career worth presenting, the long accumulated effort of becoming someone a person like Patricia would think of when a role like this opened, that is all real, and it is entirely mine. Nobody applied for that on my behalf. Nobody listed themselves as a reference. Nobody shared it in confidence and then decided privately that they deserved it more. I built it. I kept it. And on the mornings when I walk across the bridge and the light comes off the water in that specific way that New York has of making you feel, on the right morning, like you are exactly where you are supposed to be, that feeling, I have decided, is worth protecting.